The Cecil Soil Conservation District proudly presents Ordinary Point Farm as our 2018 Cooperator of the Year. Ordinary Point Farm is a beautiful grain farm owned by the Byard family. The 479-acre farm in Earlville, Maryland, is located along Grove Neck Road and borders the Sassafras River, coming to a point more than half a mile into the river. The property is bounded to the east by Money Creek. 210 acres of the farm are in grain production, and 7 acres are devoted to the farmstead. The remainder of the property consists of woods, creeks, wetlands, and shoreline, a rich habitat for a variety of flora and fauna. This beloved family farm has served as a haven for several generations of Byards, who have cherished the chance to retreat to the peace of its shores. The known history of Ordinary Point stretches back into the 1600s. In 1679, a traveler named Jasper Dankerts noted the site in his journal as the location of an ordinary, or tavern, which gave the point its name. The ordinary served as courthouse before a permanent courthouse was constructed at Old Town. Mr. Dankerts also mentioned a ferry crossing to transport travelers across the Sassafras River to Kent County. James Byard purchased the farm in 1940 from Paul Thompson. The Midland Journal reported the sale of the farm, which was noted as one of the finest farms in the first election district. James and his wife Nancy were married in 1942, and their first child, James Jr., called Jim, was born in 1944. Ordinary Point was one of 5 farms which James and Nancy owned and farmed. They settled in a bungalow, now vacant, which was built on the point from a Sears kit. When Jim's grandfather passed away, James and Nancy moved to Bohemia Manor Farm, where their children spent their early years. Jim was the eldest of 5 siblings: Rufus, Nancy, Antonia, and Samuel. A few years later, the family moved to Wilmington, Delaware. Jim spent many happy days with his family at Ordinary Point, sometimes hunting with his father or riding horses, which was his mother's greatest interest. When Jim left home, he headed west to Lake Forest College in Illinois, where he met Frances in a freshman college English class. Fran was studying psychology. They dated for years as each continued to pursue their educations. He a law degree, and she a master's in child development. Jim and Fran were married in Pennsylvania in 1969. They lived in Texas while Jim finished his law degree, and Fran taught 1st and 4th grades, as well as setting up a kindergarten and a special needs program. They settled in Wilmington, Delaware, near their families, where they raised 2 daughters, Noelle and Elise. Jim took a job as a public defender for the state of Delaware, and Fran continued teaching. They shared their love of the outdoors with their children. After his parents' deaths, Jim bought Ordinary Point Farm, which had been the site of so many happy memories for him. Jim's father had managed the farm for years until he hired Reginald Craig to farm the property in 1963. Reggie moved into the farmhouse on the property and served as caretaker there for the rest of his life. He and his wife Nancy raised their 4 children at Ordinary Point. Jim loved to visit and spend time with Reggie. They got along well and would cruise around the farm together, checking up on things. Reggie passed away in 2018 and is survived by his family and his wife of 66 years. In the early 2000s, when Jim retired after 30 years of working for the state, he began to spend 3 days a week at Ordinary Point, taking care of the farm and enjoying the beauty of nature. He and Fran valued community involvement, and they continued to volunteer their time with different organizations. A new generation began to make memories on the farm as Jim and Fran's daughters got married and had children of their own. The grandchildren explore, play on the beaches, swim and enjoy the Sassafras River, and try on tractors for size. Jim passed away in 2013, leaving a legacy of love and memories of a man devoted to his family and his community. The Soil Conservation District has worked closely with the Byards for many years on a variety of projects. The first conservation plan for the property was signed in 1961 by James Byard. When the Spry brothers began farming the property over 30 years ago, they worked with the district and the Byards to implement conservation practices on the farm. They utilized crop rotations, cover crops, and no-till farming to promote healthy soils and protect the soil structure. After Jim purchased the property, he signed a conservation plan with the district in 2005 and continued to work with the Spry brothers. The farm rests high above the Sassafras River with steep slopes and vertical cliffs. Due to these conditions and the highly erodible soils and elevation changes, the ravines continue to erode and head cut into the crop fields. To remedy this problem, 4 grade stabilization structures were installed under the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program. These structures, called pipe drops, have a grass diversion installed to divert water away from the wood's edge to the vertical riser pipe. The barrel then conveys the water along the slope to a rock plunge pool, allowing the water to safely outlet into the existing stable channel bottom. To ensure that the pipe drop functions as designed, soil compaction is required. Other best management practices installed on the property include grassed waterways, critical area plantings, and field borders. The Sprys plant cover crops every fall after the main crop is harvested. Cover crops are grasses, small grains, or legumes planted after the summer crop has been harvested in order to decrease erosion and loss of nutrients. In 2005, Jim and Fran began their largest conservation project to protect the shorelines of Ordinary Point. In some places, the point had narrowed to only 12 feet wide. The project was an extensive one and took 2 years to complete. The first phase was reconstruction of the farm road down to the point. The road grade elevation was lowered in some areas and raised in others to allow the riverbank to be graded to stable slopes. The second phase was restoration of nearly 5,000 feet of shoreline. Erosion control measures, including silt fence and turbidity curtains, were used to prevent sedimentation of the river during site work. The point was dominated by Phragmites and other noxious weeds, as well as many dead and diseased trees. So clearing away this undesirable vegetation was the next step. Once clearing was completed, the upper banks were graded to create stable slopes. Slopes were stabilized as grading progressed, and shrubs were planted in these areas. Stone sills were constructed in order to prevent shoreline erosion and reestablish shoreline habitat. Around 30,000 cubic yards of sandy fill were placed in these areas behind the sills to establish new marsh areas. The new marsh areas were planted with native grasses and plants. Jim and Fran took a course together at Ashland Nature Center on conservation easements in Delaware. This helped kickstart their interest in conservation projects at Ordinary Point. Jim's major interest for the farm was in conservation, which was very important to both him and Fran. Ordinary Point was the site of many childhood memories, and he wanted to see it preserved. To ensure that future generations would be able to farm the land, Jim and Fran worked with the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy to place a Royal Legacy Conservation easement on the property in 2007. Ordinary Point, with its woods and marshes, creeks and shorelines, is home to a wide variety of species. There are several areas designated as wetlands of special state concern, and part of the farm is located in the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area. The property is home to several rare, threatened, or endangered species. Bald eagles, herons, and ospreys make their nest on the property, and deer are abundant. The water, woods, and fields are full of life. The American lotus blooms along the shorelines each spring. Fran is continuing Jim's conservation work on the farm and planning for new projects to protect this beautiful farm with its diverse habitats. The Cecil Soil Conservation District honors the memory of Jim Byard and recognizes Ordinary Point Farm and the Byard family for their passion for preservation and conservation.